My name is Samantha. I'm 34 years old and I work in finance in Boston. Every Christmas, I'm the one in the kitchen from early morning, preparing every dish, folding each napkin, wiping down every corner of the house to welcome relatives into the mansion where I've been covering the electric, water, and insurance bills for the past 2 years. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, my family would finally see me and love me as an important part of them. But this year, just as I set the tray of pastries in the middle of the table, my father suddenly stood up, tapped his spoon against a wine glass, and spoke in a cold voice, cutting through dozens of eyes fixed on me. "You are a burden to this family. By tomorrow, you need to be out of this house." I froze. No one reacted, no one laughed, and no one stopped him. My mother kept her head down, quietly moving vegetables around on her plate, while my younger brother casually sipped his wine as if everything was going according to plan. But it didn't stop there. My father pulled out a sheet of paper and slammed it down on the table. A legal agreement, bearing a signature my name. It stated that I had voluntarily given up all of my savings and assets to repay my parents for raising me. I had never signed anything like that. If you were in my place, how would you react when your whole family turned their backs on you in front of everyone and then tried to take away everything you had built over the years? Leave me a comment below. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe justice should start with protecting yourself. And stay tuned, because what I discovered afterward was even more brutal. I stood there in that wide dining room filled with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon, but suddenly all of it choked me. The paper in front of me gleamed white under the crystal chandelier. I had never signed any such document. The italic text, the detached tone, it wasn't the language I'd ever used in any contract. I've worked in finance for nearly a decade. I could recognize a forgery. "What is this?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I didn't need to shout. The room was so silent that the clink of a spoon on a plate could make someone flinch. Richard didn't answer immediately. He looked at me with the same eyes he used on panhandlers outside the bank, pity laced with disdain. "You already signed it," he said flatly, as if the matter were closed. "Last month, when your mother gave you that stack of insurance papers, it was in there." I turned to Elaine. She still didn't lift her head. Her thin hands kept cutting a piece of beef as if nothing had happened. "Mom?" I called, hoping she'd at least look at me. But she only sighed and muttered as if to herself. "It's fair, Samantha. You've been in this house long enough." "Long enough?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Do you mean the time I paid your health insurance? Every single month? Or the electricity, water, gas, groceries? Or maybe you mean the time I had to cover Tyler's bank debt so this house wouldn't be repossessed?" Tyler, slouched across the table in a wrinkled shirt, smirked and shrugged. "Don't make it a big deal. It's just a piece of paper. You've got nothing to lose anyway." I turned squarely toward him. "I have everything to lose. Not because I don't have money, but because I trusted you all as family." I grabbed the paper off the table, folded it, and slid it into my pocket. "This will be examined carefully." Richard leaned against his chair, voice rising. "Who do you think you're talking to? You live under my roof, eat my food, use everything I worked hard to build, paid for by your daughter." I cut him off. "Every bill in this house is under my name. That new fridge, bought with my card, the roof repairs last winter, came out of my savings. And you call me a burden?" Elaine set her fork and knife down and finally looked up. "You should be grateful. Not everyone has the chance to live in a family like this. We put you through school, paid your college tuition. Now it's your turn to give back." I dropped my shoulders, staring at the velvet draped table where the porcelain dishes still steamed. I remembered waking at 5 a.m., cooking every dish, even the stuffing Tyler claimed to hate, but still cleaned off his plate. Now, all of it looked like a staged performance, and I was the character shoved off stage at the climax. How exactly am I supposed to give back? By selling off my own life? By shrinking myself just to keep everyone else comfortable while I run dry? I looked around the table at relatives pretending to pick up food so they wouldn't get involved. Not one person stood. Not one person asked if I was okay. I placed my napkin on the chair, my hand trembling slightly. I will leave this place, but not because you tell me to. Because I don't have to endure being used anymore. Richard shot to his feet. If you walk out that door, don't you ever come back. You think I'd ever want to? My voice was almost weightless as I turned away. I walked slowly toward the front door. The house I once thought was safe now felt like an abandoned shell with lying walls. Behind me, I heard a faint sob, then the clatter of a knife dropping. I didn't turn around. I opened the door and stepped into the cold, letting the icy air cut my skin like a cruel but necessary greeting of freedom. Night had fallen, snow had begun to drift down. I walked along the driveway, my low heels sinking into the thin ice. Each step pulled a weight off my chest. I didn't know where I would sleep that night, but I knew I wasn't going back. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own family? That every effort, every sacrifice you made was only fuel for someone else's ambitions? If you have, leave a line below. Maybe my story is part of yours too. And there's still so much more to tell, because what I uncovered later went far beyond what you imagine. I stepped off the threshold but didn't leave the yard right away. My hand clenched tight around the strap of my purse, my fingers numb both from the cold and from holding back the dizzying rush inside me. Snowflakes landed softly, stinging my cheeks like shards of glass. But the coldest thing wasn't the Boston night wind, it was the eyes of those who had sat with me at that table only minutes earlier. They looked at me like a figure on a balance sheet, no tears, no calls to stop me, just silence and inevitability. I leaned against the porch wall, waiting for my chest to steady, but instead the door creaked open again. Elaine stepped out. No coat, just a thin shawl thrown around her shoulders as if everything were still normal. "You left your wallet in the kitchen," she said, holding it out. "I brought it to you." I took it from her hand. We stood face to face under the porch light, neither speaking. I studied her face, the lines by her eyes, the lips pressed tight, so familiar. How many times had I let it slide when she turned away instead of speaking up for me, when I needed even the smallest protection? I used to tell myself she was caught in the middle, but now it was clear. She chose to stand with him, with Tyler, with the balance in my account. I didn't resent her for aging, for needing care. What hurt was that the one caring for her all these years had been me, and what she said next cut the final strings I had been clinging to. "But you'll still pay my insurance, won't you?" Her voice was light, as if I'd just come back from the store and she was reminding me to pick up milk. I nodded slowly. "Yes, at least until your appointment next week. Thank you." She turned back inside without waiting for a reply. I watched her figure disappear behind the laugh. Door. The house fell silent again, only the distant hum of traffic breaking it. I stepped down the porch steps, each one heavy as stone. No one saw me off, no one waited. The car by the curb shuddered when I opened the door. I slid into the driver's seat, the interior light casting a glow on the worn but clean dashboard. Beside the wheel was my monthly expense list, now meaningless. I pulled out my phone, thought of calling Claire, the only person outside my family who knew what I'd been through, the one who always told me, "You don't have to carry this forever." But I didn't call. I set the phone down and rested my forehead on the wheel. My heart wasn't racing, and there were no tears. just an emptiness spreading through every bone. By the time I reached the small apartment Claire shared with her boyfriend, the clock read nearly 11 p.m. She opened the door before I could knock. "Good Lord, you look like you've seen a ghost," she whispered, pulling me inside. I dropped my coat, kicked off my shoes, and stood still in the living room. Claire studied me for a long moment, then quietly poured a glass of warm water, pressing it into my hands without asking a single question. That silence told me I could breathe, at least here. I sank onto the sofa, still clutching the glass, staring blankly at the rug beneath the table. After a while, Claire finally asked softly, "Tell me, what happened?" I told her. Every detail. The dinner, the paper, Tyler, my father's words, my mother's nod, the suffocating silence of the relatives. Claire didn't interrupt, didn't comment. When I finished, she only exhaled slowly and spoke in a tone I'd never heard from her before, gentle but edged with fury. "You're not a wallet, and from now on, they don't get to touch anything that's yours." I looked at her, opened my mouth to say something, but then shook my head. "They don't need to touch. They've already taken." Claire stood, went to the back room, and returned with a heating pad, placing it on my hand. "Then we'll take it back, piece by piece." I smiled faintly, the first time since leaving that house. It felt lighter, though still exhausting. I've never liked confrontation. I always believed silence and effort would make people recognize my heart. But now it was different. Now I saw that some people only stop when they're forced to. "You think they can forge legal documents without leaving traces?" Claire asked, her tone as casual as if she were discussing work. I looked at her, slowly setting the glass down. "Do you have your laptop? We have work to do." I sat before her laptop, the pale glow highlighting the shadows under my eyes in the reflection. The keys clacked steadily in the quiet room, interrupted only by my sighs or Claire's soft footsteps as she made tea in the kitchen. I didn't know exactly what I was searching for, only that I needed something concrete, something sharp enough to cut through the tangled web they had spun around me. I opened cloud storage folders, combed through bank statements, tax records, property contracts I'd kept out of habit. Everything was neatly organized, sorted by year, by category, the way my work demanded. And then I stopped when I saw a file titled Lake Willow Cabin, John Bennett's Will. Lake Willow, the dark oak cabin, stood deep in the pine forests of northern Maine, where my grandfather John Bennett used to take me every summer when I was still in elementary school. I remember the sharp scent of pine resin, the creak of the floorboards every morning, and the way he brewed strong black coffee in his old silver pot. After he passed, I never went back. But I never forgot that he left the cabin to me in a handwritten will, a copy of which had once been sent to the family attorney. I pulled the file up and opened it. The crisp scan revealed every stroke of his handwriting. I, John Bennett, leave. Full ownership of the Lake Willow cabin to my granddaughter, Samantha Mitchell. Any other heirs have no right to interfere with, use, or transfer this property unless with the written consent of Samantha Mitchell. I leaned back in my chair. The will was unambiguous, complete. But the feeling that spread through me wasn't reassurance, it was a chill down my spine. Because in recent months, during several property tax payments, my name had not appeared on any notices from the local tax office regarding the cabin. I had thought maybe the records were delayed or that the cabin was temporarily flagged as inherited property, but now that explanation no longer made sense. Something had been arranged. I turned to Claire, who was walking in holding a mug of hot tea. "Do you still have that scanner and printer?" She set the mug on the table, bottom shelf under the television stand. "Why? What's going on?" "I think my father forged documents. The cabin at Lake Willow is no longer under my name." Claire didn't ask why I was so certain. She'd known me long enough to understand that when I said something, it meant I already had more than one piece of proof. I pulled out an old USB stick from my wallet, something I'd carried out of habit since my days working as an internal accountant for a real estate company. I had never uploaded everything to the cloud. A past incident involving data misuse had made me cautious, almost obsessively so. In the folder labeled Property Transfers, I spotted a PDF with a suspicious title, Agreement, Transfer, Cabin, Willow, 2023, signed. Just the name alone made my skin prickle. I opened it. The image of the contract appeared, complete with my name, Tyler's, and a signature, my signature, except I had never signed it. Below the signature was a note, transfer of ownership of Lake Willow Cabin to Tyler Mitchell, effective October 15th, 2023. I read every line carefully. The document was formatted like a standard transfer contract, but several things were wrong. No third-party witness, no official notary seal. Most importantly, the signature. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. There's no notary seal, Claire pointed to the corner of the file. Did they really think a forged signature would be enough to fool the system? I nodded. If they uploaded it directly into the digital property registry and had a friendly clerk confirm it, the transfer could have gone through. Claire exhaled sharply, shaking her head. So it wasn't enough to throw you out of the house. They secretly took your inheritance, too. I let out a dry laugh. Seems they've been planning this for longer than I realized. I opened an attached file in an old email, a message from Richard 2 months earlier when he'd sent me urgent tax forms to sign. Among them were several PDFs with unclear content. I had skimmed them, signed the pages I thought were legitimate, and returned the printed copies. I never imagined they could have slipped in a fraudulent file. But clearly, they had. I need to check the property records right now, I said, already typing into the county portal where the cabin was registered. After a few clicks, the property information appeared. Owner Tyler Mitchell. Record updated October 19th. My chest tightened. That name felt like a blade etched into memory. The cabin my grandfather had left me, where I once fell asleep in his arms at age 5, now bore the name of someone who had never even set foot there. Tyler probably didn't even remember the lake's name. Claire bent closer to the screen, then looked back at me. Now you need a good lawyer. And fast. I didn't answer right away. I was thinking of someone. Someone I had worked with during a complex estate dispute years ago, a lawyer known for his meticulousness and refusal to back down. Silently, I picked up my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found the name Gavin Marks, Estate Law. The phone rang 3 times before a deep male voice came through. Marks speaking. I drew a steady breath. Gavin, this is Samantha Mitchell. I need your help, and maybe a fight. I sat at Claire's dining table, the laptop open before me, dozens of digital files pulled up one by one. Outside the window, the night was thick, street lights casting, shifting shadows across the dark wooden floor, like a scene from an old film. On the table, my coffee had long gone cold, but I still held the mug as if to remind myself to stay awake. Claire sat across from me, hair tied in a bun, wearing cotton pajamas printed with little medical icons, a pencil in hand, and a thick notebook open. Though she was a nurse, her organizational skills were no less sharp than mine. Maybe because both of us had faced situations demanding precision and absolute control. This time the subject wasn't a patient or a financial project, it was a web of lies woven by the very people I had once called family. "Where are you starting?" Claire asked, peering at me over her glasses. I pulled a stack of paper documents from the file case beside me. Utilities, internet, health insurance. Every bill for the past 3 years has been under my name. I've saved both hard copies and digital ones. Even the fridge replacement in July, the plumbing repairs last November. I have receipts, invoices, bank statements. I opened folders, each image of an invoice like a slice of time. Every expense, every number was proof of sacrifices, dismissed as obligation. This is the health insurance policy for my mother. I bought it, I paid the premiums, and these are the emails from my father. I switched to Gmail. For 2 years, he hasn't called to ask how I am. He only emailed reminders for me to cover whatever they claimed the family had advanced. Claire scribbled quickly. We need to categorize everything you've paid. Group. Property, living expenses, healthcare, fixed assets. Mark what has invoices, what's backed by emails or messages. I nodded. Can you help me cross-check the bank files? In the monthly transfers folder, there are screenshots of the accounts. Claire turned the laptop toward herself, eyes locked on the screen. Meanwhile, I pulled out another box of papers from my suitcase, old contracts, letters, even holiday cards from my mother that included handwritten notes reminding me, don't forget to transfer the money before the end of the month. Words that once felt like care now stood as damning evidence. It's impressive you kept all this, Claire said without looking up. If it were me, living with a family like that, I would have burned everything or torn it to shreds. I gave a brittle laugh. I kept it because I was afraid I'd forget. Afraid that one day they'd say I hadn't done enough, that I hadn't tried hard enough. I wanted proof that I gave everything I could. Claire looked up. Now we'll use that proof to show the truth. Not to them, to the law. I opened another folder labeled Lake Willow Maintenance Costs. Inside were receipts for roof repairs, a new water heater, even an email from the security company confirming I had signed the contract to install the alarm system back in 2021. Each item was a blade tearing through my parents' lies. If they thought I hadn't been paying attention, they had underestimated me. Claire flipped to a new page. Do you still have the scans of your old savings accounts? Of course. I pulled up bank 20192023. It showed quarterly statements, documenting the steady drain of my funds to support them. From over $90,000, my account was now barely under $4,000. You nearly bankrupted yourself keeping afloat a household that was quietly digging your grave, Claire murmured. I didn't react. I was too tired for feelings to surface. I just kept sorting the files, labeling by month, tagging clearly. By the time the clock neared 2 a.m., we had divided everything into 5 main folders: household expenses, inherited cabin, correspondence, bank statements, and voicemail recordings from my mother messages that once seemed harmless but now revealed manipulation. I looked at the neatly organized data, feeling as though I'd built a steel fence around a life they had once trespassed freely. But I knew data was only the first step. The real challenge would be the legal system, the lawyers, the bureaucracy where there's no room for emotion. I would need to fight with logic, documents, and indisputable proof. Claire stood, handing me a fresh cup of tea. I'm off tomorrow. We'll go to the lawyer's office together. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. The liquid slid down my throat, bitter but strangely soothing. Are you sure you want to drag this into court? Claire asked, not out of doubt, but genuine concern. It won't be easy. I leaned back, eyes on the fogged-up window. I don't need easy. I need justice. The next morning, before the sunlight broke through Claire's curtains, I was already at the computer. Wireless earbuds in, a soft focus playlist playing. But this wasn't an ordinary workday. Today was the beginning of something I should have done long ago. I logged into the utility company's portal and canceled every payment linked to the house at 84 Lakehurst, the place I once called home. With one click, the confirmation popped up, cold and final. Next was the internet account, the premium plan I had upgraded so Tyler could play games without lag and Mom could stream Netflix endlessly in the living room. I quietly removed my credit card from the payment system. Then came health insurance. I remembered vividly the day I took my mother to the clinic, her frail hand gripping mine, eyes teary, whispering only, "Thank you, I don't have anyone else but you." That sentence once convinced me love was still there, despite everything. But today, as I clicked cancel on her dependent coverage, my hand didn't shake. That policy had been one of the most expensive burdens I'd carried all year. Finally, I logged into the bank and disabled every automatic transfer. I opened a brand new account, unlinked from any email or phone number they might trace. A safe space, at least financially. Within hours, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The first call came from Elaine. I stared at the screen before answering. "Samantha!" Her voice cracked through the line, frantic and choked. "The power's been cut. The internet won't work. What's happening?" "What's happening?" I repeated evenly. "Maybe you should ask the person who's been paying those bills for the past 2 years. They might have the answer." "Don't say that." She lowered her tone, shifting into a vague pleading. I have a spa appointment this afternoon. They'll keep the deposit if I cancel last minute." I closed my eyes. "Then maybe you should call them before you lose more money. You can't just abandon the whole family like this." Elaine snapped. "Are you planning to leave us in the dark?" "I've lived in the dark of this house for years, Mom," I answered slowly. "Now, at least the lights match the truth." I hung up before she could say more. Then the phone rang again. This time it was Tyler. "Samantha, are you out of your mind?" I was in the middle of a match and the internet cut out. "What the hell did you do?" I heard footsteps stomping on the wooden floor, the slam of something against a keyboard. "You think just because you got thrown out you have the right to wreck everything?" Tyler shouted, his voice blazing hot. I let out a soft laugh. "I wasn't thrown out. I chose to leave. And I also chose to shut down everything I was paying for. If you can't manage your own internet, you can head to a cafe. You're selfish. You don't think about anyone but yourself. You're calling the person who paid for the water you shower with every day selfish?" I asked lightly. "The one who silently covered your credit card debt last year? The one who bought you a new laptop so you could stream with your friends? Do you really want to start a debate about who's more selfish?" Silence hung on the line for a few seconds. Then Tyler growled each word. "You'll regret going against family." "No, Tyler. Family doesn't force you to go against them." I ended the call, my hand still gripping the phone. My lips were dry, but my chest felt lighter. Claire stepped out of the bedroom holding a cup of hot tea. "Second call already?" she asked, setting the cup down beside me. "I think there will be plenty more." Claire folded her legs up onto the chair, sitting beside me. "Actually, the more they call, the more it shows you're making them lose control. And they've never had to live without controlling you." I nodded, eyes fixed on my phone screen. Messages were pouring in. Relatives, aunts, uncles, even a few of my mother's friends I'd barely spoken more than 3 sentences to. All carried the same tone. Fake sympathy, subtle blame, or vague threats. Claire studied me for a moment, then said slowly, "I think it's time you start writing everything down." "What do you mean?" "History. Your story. Stop letting them manipulate the narrative." I went quiet. She was right. For years I had stayed silent, endured, tried not to make waves for fear of cracking that fragile thing called family. But real family never turns kindness into a trap. I pulled the chair closer, sat up straight, and laid my hands on the keyboard. The glow of the screen lit my face, reflecting in Claire's eyes, and for one fleeting moment I felt I was starting to reclaim myself, not through rage, but through clarity. Rain had been falling since morning, streaks of water curving down the window pane like brushstrokes of someone trying to erase all traces. I sat still in Claire's apartment, lights off, holding a warm cup of tea while my mind stayed cold. The phone was muted, notifications from family still flooding in, but I no longer cared. What needed to be said, I had said. What needed to be done, I was doing. I just hadn't anticipated how quickly things would escalate. Around 6 p.m., just as night settled in, loud pounding shook the door. Not an ordinary knock, but a harsh, forceful thud, accompanied by a deep voice I could never mistake. "Samantha, open this door. We need to talk." I froze in the living room. Claire, in the kitchen preparing dinner, stopped mid-slice. I motioned for her to stay silent and crept toward the door, peering through the peephole. Under the hallway light, Richard stood drenched in his coat, his face taut with anger. His fist slammed against the wood again. "You think you can hide here forever? Cutting the power, the internet, canceling insurance? What do you think family is, huh? A rental agreement?" I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest, but my voice stayed steady. "Claire, call the police for me." She didn't ask questions, just quietly picked up her phone and dialed. Meanwhile, Richard's voice boomed louder in the hall. "You owe me. Everything you have comes from this family. You don't get to vanish and deny your responsibility." Across the hall, a door cracked open. Mrs. Henderson, Claire's elderly neighbor, poked her head out, irritation clear on her face. "Sir, keep it down. This is a residence, not a fish market." Richard snapped toward her. "This is my family business. None of your concern. You're standing outside someone else's door, pounding and screaming during dinner." "I think it is my concern," she shot back, then slammed her door. I stood a few feet from the door, saying nothing. My grip tightened on the glass of water on the table, my throat constricted. Claire whispered, "The police are on their way. Stay away from the door." Richard's shouting didn't stop. "If you don't open, I'll break it down." And to prove it, he kicked the door hard. The hinges groaned, and my heart lurched. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Minutes later, a commanding voice rang out from the end of the hallway. "Sir, step away from the door, now." Through the peephole, I saw two officers approach, hands at their belts where radios and cuffs hung. Richard spun around, shock flashing across his face as he realized control had slipped away. "She's my daughter. I have every right to see her." "No one has the right to damage private property or disturb the peace. We'll need to see your ID, and you'll come with us to file a report." Richard argued a bit more, but was eventually escorted downstairs, shouting over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, Samantha." I didn't reply. I stood still, watching through the crack of the door, feeling no victory, only exhaustion deep in my bones. Less than 20 minutes later, one of the officers returned, knocking gently. Claire opened the door while I stayed behind, cautious. "Can you confirm you're Samantha Mitchell?" the officer asked. "I am." He held out a paper. "We've filed an incident report for disturbance and property damage. Do you want to pursue this further as a harassment complaint?" I nodded without hesitation. "Yes." He scribbled a few more notes, then paused, as if weighing something. "Miss Mitchell, I have a question not part of the official report, but related to some older files." I nodded again. "In the past 3 months, our department received at least 4 anonymous reports about someone using your name to take out financial loans, including temporary mortgages and short-term credit. Were you aware of these?" I froze. "No, I haven't taken out any new loans in the past year." "Then we'll need you to come down to the station to file a separate statement. There's clear evidence someone has been using your identity without permission. Most of the applications link back to your old address on Lakehurst." I glanced at Claire, my hand instinctively tightening. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder, a message without words. I'll come. Can you send the details to my attorney as well? Of course, he said. And don't worry, you have every right to protect yourself. After the officers left, I sank back onto the sofa. Inside me, it felt like a spool of thread slowly unraveling. Claire draped a blanket over my legs and sat beside me, not asking questions, not pressing me to share. She just stayed, keeping me company as we listened to the silence of a night that had just ended a confrontation I never imagined I'd face. 3 days after Richard's report was filed, I walked into Gavin Marks's law office, a 3-story red brick building in Boston's historic South End. No flashy sign, no gaudy billboard. Just a small brass plaque engraved, Marks and Associates, estate and civil dispute attorneys. The glass door opened to the scent of oak wood mixed with roasted coffee, the steady rhythm of typing, and the low voices of paralegals behind partitioned desks. Gavin greeted me with a firm handshake, not overly warm but enough to make me feel respected, not pitied. He was the one I had worked with years ago on a complicated divorce asset case, and the only person I thought of when this situation escalated beyond family conflict. Have a seat. Gavin gestured to the leather chair opposite his desk. I reviewed the materials you sent. Some things aren't simple. I nodded, setting the file bag on his desk. I figured. He opened his laptop, clicked through Windows, then turned the screen toward me. The cabin at Lake Willow is now listed under Tyler Mitchell. The transfer was approved at the Franklin County Registrar's office 3 weeks ago. Approved how? I asked, though deep down I already suspected the answer. There's a deed of transfer with your signature, Gavin emphasized with air quotes, and a witness attesting to it. I leaned back, chest tightening. Who was the witness? Gavin's gaze held mine steadily. Elaine Mitchell. I sat in silence for a long time. The office air felt dense, broken only by the hum of a printer somewhere in the hallway. Could she not have realized what she was signing? My voice was low, as if coming from far away. As a legal witness, she had to sign in person at the registrar's office, Gavin said. There are surveillance cameras. They recorded it. I'll request the footage. I nodded, feeling as though someone had yanked me out of an old dream. Doubt was gone now. The vague sense of being used had hardened into reality, a truth sealed, signed, and notarized. How much is the cabin valued at? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. $750,000, Gavin replied. And right now, it's on the internal transaction list of a real estate brokerage that specializes in buying inherited properties cheap. The representative for that company is a friend of Richard's. He's trying to sell the cabin? I pressed, as if I needed one last confirmation to sever whatever softness was left in me. And already negotiating the initial deposit. If we don't act fast, the property could be legally transferred in less than a week. I bowed my head. The smell of coffee from the machine nearby rose up, but it couldn't mask the rancid taste of betrayal. I still remembered that last summer afternoon sitting on the cabin porch with my grandfather, listening to him talk about how he had built every wooden beam in that place, saying I was the only one with the patience and quiet nature to truly understand it. He had chosen me because he knew I would protect it, and now they were planning to sell it off, like something useless. Gavin shut his laptop. I can file for a court order to freeze all transactions tied to this property within the next 24 hours, but I'll need a full affidavit from you, along with every piece of evidence of your original inheritance, your grandfather's will, maintenance contracts, and every investment you've put into the cabin to this day. I opened my folder, pulling out neatly prepared copies. The will, the property insurance policy, invoices for roof repairs, electrician statements, termite treatment contracts. Each sheet a slice of the past, now turned into weapons of defense. Gavin reviewed each page carefully, nodding slowly. Good. We'll also need the originals for the hearing. I clenched my fists. Do you think I can win? He looked up, his gaze steady. You have the right, you have the evidence. And more importantly, you have resolve. Leave the rest to me. I left his office as the Boston sky turned a thick silvery gray. Wind gusted hard, slipping into my collar as if to remind me this winter would be harsher than the last. But like me, it had changed. No more resignation, no more silence. I walked faster, clutching the file close, knowing I was on the right path, even if it would not be easy. I stood before the Franklin County Courthouse on a foggy morning, gripping the folder tight inside my coat sleeve. Gavin walked beside me, his charcoal trench coat sweeping around his tall frame, his face calm, his eyes focused as if he'd already run the entire hearing in his mind. Neither of us spoke from the parking lot to the security checkpoint, but I felt steadier with him there. I wasn't walking in as someone begging for justice. I was walking in as someone reclaiming what was mine. We filed an official lawsuit against Richard and Elaine Mitchell for forging my signature, seizing inherited property, and using my identity for unauthorized loans. Gavin also sent letters to 3 commercial banks and a financial company where Richard had applied for credit under my name with false information. At the same time, I authorized him to work with the tax authority to request an investigation into irregular filings tied to the Lake Willow cabin. We need to apply pressure from every angle, Gavin said as we stepped out of the judge's chambers, holding a signed order halting all transactions. Not just suing, they need to know every escape route has been cut off. And just as he predicted, the dominoes began to fall. 2 days after our filing went into the public record, an article appeared in the legal section of the Boston Tribune. The headline wasn't flashy, but it stopped readers cold. Couple accused of forging daughter's signature to seize $750,000 cabin. The piece laid out the key facts of the case, quoted my attorney, noted my 3 years of financial contributions, and ran alongside a photo of the cabin under snow, light filtering through pines casting shadows on the frozen lake. I didn't share the article. Claire did. She posted it with my name tagged and a single caption. Some children don't betray their parents. They're just forced to protect themselves. Within an hour, the article had been shared hundreds of times, sparking a flood of comments I couldn't help but read. Some defended my parents, calling me ungrateful. Others shared their own stories of being drained, exploited, then blamed by relatives. But most importantly, silence was breaking. People who had once been quiet in my family were now speaking out. Aunt Margaret left a voicemail nearly 5 minutes long, saying she had never agreed with how Richard treated his daughter, that the cabin had always seemed suspicious, and that we all need to sit down and possible does not rack. Talk this through. I didn't call back. Uncle Walter sent an email offering to testify that Elaine herself had admitted the cabin was mine at a family gathering 3 years ago. I forwarded it to Gavin, but the loudest reaction came from Tyler. He began calling me nonstop from block numbers. When I didn't answer, he left voicemails, his voice shaking with fury. You're destroying everything. You think that cabin will always be yours? You think just because you're successful you get to steal someone else's dream? I listened quietly to the recordings, not responding. But that night, when calls kept coming past midnight, Claire snatched the phone. Listen, she said sharply. If you call again, we'll report everything to the police. Samantha doesn't owe you a single explanation, and her dream is to sleep one night without being threatened. Tyler went silent after that call, but I knew it wasn't over. 2 days later, I received a notice from the bank. 3 attempted logins to my new account had been blocked. The IP matched the Lakehurst address. I moved all assets to a credit union with its own security system and signed up for a privacy protection program through my attorney. Gavin also brought in a cybersecurity firm to monitor suspicious activity. Family whispers began shifting into direct messages. Some said I should handle this privately. Others threatened to cut ties if I dared to drag my parents to court. But I wasn't wavering, because more clearly than ever, I saw it. For years, I had been cast as the strong one, so others could dump their burdens, shift blame, and keep their images clean. They wanted my silence because it was convenient. They wanted my compliance because it preserved the order they had long designed. What they hadn't counted on was that I had learned to stand tall and stand firm. Late one afternoon, as I sat with Gavin in the firm's conference room, he slid a new file across the table. The court has issued an emergency summons for Richard and Elaine. We'll begin hearings sooner than expected. I stared at the bright red seal on the folder, feeling each heartbeat slow and deliberate. The truth was moving now. No one could stop it, and I had nothing left to lose. The hearing was set for a Monday morning, as icy winds swept through Boston's streets, carrying the scent of coming snow. I wore a simple charcoal suit, hair tied back, eyes scanning each line of Gavin's briefs. The courtroom wasn't large, but it held a gravity that pressed on everyone inside. Dark wood tables, deep green walls, ceiling lights casting straight shadows across polished surfaces. Richard sat opposite me, coat pressed, face straining for calm but eyes red with fatigue. Elaine kept her head bowed from the moment she walked in, seated beside their attorney, never once looking my way. Tyler was absent. Word had spread that he was liquidating personal belongings to cover debts. I'd heard he fled to Florida, staying with an old friend. No one in the family defended him anymore, just as no one had ever defended me. The judge, a woman around 60 with a firm, steady voice, read the case summary, flipped through pages, and listened to each side in turn. Gavin laid out clear evidence: my grandfather's will, cabin maintenance contracts in my name, my long-term financial investments, bank statements. But the centerpiece was the handwriting expert's report. The deed's signature was undeniably forged. The judge listened carefully, her fingers tapping lightly on the bench. When Gavin presented video footage from the registrar's office showing Elaine signing as witness to the forged deed, the room seemed to drop several degrees. I didn't turn to look at my mother. I had watched that clip dozens of times. I didn't need another view to know she understood exactly what she was doing. The opposing attorney argued misunderstanding, claiming Richard believed the cabin had been transferred within the family, that there was no intent to defraud, that using my name was merely an administrative error. Gavin calmly produced the draft sales agreement with a brokerage, along with text messages between Richard and an agent where Richard wrote, "She won't notice if I move fast." The courtroom went utterly silent after that. When given a chance for final remarks, Richard stood, straining to keep his voice level. Everything I did was for family. I raised her, gave her food, education, and now, over one house, my daughter drags her parents to court. She's destroying this family. I rose immediately, without turning back. I'm not destroying the family. I'm simply refusing to let the family destroy me. If this father had truly raised me with love, he wouldn't have forged my signature or used my name for debt. And this mother, I fixed my eyes on Elaine. She still did not lift her head. If she truly cared for me, she wouldn't have used the insurance I paid for to get lip fillers and eyelid surgery, then come home claiming it was a checkup. Here is the invoice from the cosmetic clinic with her name, and the date and time matching the insurance denial notice I received. I placed the copy gently on the judge's bench. Behind me, a few whispers rippled. Among the spectators were distant relatives, the same ones who once messaged me urging that I should forgive. Now, none of them spoke. After nearly 40 minutes of deliberation, the judge brought down the gavel. The court rules that the lakeside cabin at Lake Willow is the legal property of the plaintiff, Miss Samantha Mitchell. Acts of signature forgery and the use of personal identity for unlawful gain will be transferred to civil court and the Financial Investigation Bureau for further proceedings. As for Mr. Richard Mitchell, due to evidence suggesting potential criminal conduct, he will await further summons for investigation. Court is adjourned. I didn't smile, didn't sigh with relief. I simply stood, gathered my file, and walked toward the door. Gavin followed without needing to say a word. In the hallway, just as I was about to head down the stairs, Elaine suddenly rushed toward me. Her voice was hoarse, trembling as though she might collapse if I so much as turned my head. "Samantha, can't you withdraw the case? Don't push your father into bankruptcy. This will crush him." I turned, meeting her eyes directly. "I've carried more than I could bear hundreds of times for him. Now, let him carry it. That's what fairness looks like." Elaine said nothing more. She just stood there watching me leave, her frail shoulders shaking in the wide hallway. Richard didn't come out. He stayed inside the courtroom, phone pressed to his ear. Maybe with a lawyer, maybe a banker, maybe no one at all. I stepped outside the courthouse, the cold wind sweeping through my tangled hair, bringing with it a lightness so unfamiliar it almost felt foreign. Not because I had won, but because I no longer felt fear when they called my name in that controlling tone of years past. Snow fell quietly over the dark oak cabin, layering the steps, the porch, and the window panes facing the lake in soft white powder. The water was frozen solid, but the pale December sky shimmered on its surface like glass. I stood in the small kitchen, hand resting on a kettle beginning to boil, eyes fixed on the frosted window where the old pines swayed in the wind. It had been exactly 1 year since I walked out of that courtroom, leaving behind the shadows of a house built on lies to step into a life I had chosen for myself. The cabin, once treated as a commodity, was now truly a home. No one could force me out. No one else held the power to decide for me. Claire was out on the porch, bundled in a thick sweater, stringing lights along the railing. At her feet sat a cardboard box filled with wooden ornaments and red ribbons. She always had a gift for making small things memorable. Inside, Max, her boyfriend, was setting the table while Baxter, their golden retriever, bounded around the rug as if sensing how special the day was. I carried out a tray of cookies. The scent of cinnamon and almond filled the warm room. The tall tree brushed the ceiling, decorated simply. A few golden strands of lights, silver baubles, and a wooden star I had carved on the first cold night of the season. Every detail here was chosen by me, not because anyone demanded it, but because I found it beautiful. Truly beautiful. That evening, as everyone gathered around the small dining table, I lit the fireplace. The glow flickered across Claire and Max's faces, making me feel as though I were living inside an old postcard, gentle, quiet, nothing weighing me down. "We should do this every year," Max said, pouring more wine into Claire's glass. "Just a few people, but people who truly want to be here." Claire smiled, resting her hand on his. "As long as we have Sam's ginger cookies, I'll always come back." I laughed softly. "As long as you two don't bring a 6-page gift list like last Christmas." "No way," Claire protested, eyes sparkling. "Last year I only wrote half. The other half was Max's. And your section was titled Things We Don't Need But Should Have," Max added. "Like a solar-powered dog shaver." We all burst out laughing, the sound ringing through the cozy cabin. I leaned back in my chair, glancing outside at the falling snow. For a moment, my heart settled, not because of the past, but because this present was enough. A knock came as we were opening gifts. Not loud, just 3 gentle taps, enough to make me tilt my head. I opened the door. Cold wind slipped through, tugging at my scarf. On the snow-covered steps stood Tessa, an old backpack weighing down her shoulders, both hands buried in her coat pockets. Her face looked younger than I remembered, but her eyes no longer held the same naivety. Something in her stance made me pause. "Can I stay here a few days?" she asked softly, her voice rough from the cold and from something heavier than that. I looked at her, my cousin, the only one who once quietly warned me the night I was forced out, the one who hadn't defended me, but also hadn't turned away. I froze for a second, then stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in, before the cookies get cold." Tessa slipped off her shoes by the door, set down her backpack as if shedding part of her burden. Claire saw her, gave a small nod, and pulled another chair from the corner. No questions needed. We continued eating amid soft music, golden lights draping over dishes, over tired lines around our eyes, over the pieces inside us still healing. I didn't ask why Tessa had come. I didn't need to know yet. Just as I once walked into the night with nothing but a bag and a fragile hope that there was still a place for me. Later, I stood at the window, watching Tessa curled up asleep on the sofa, her breathing slow and steady. Claire had draped another blanket over her, while Max quietly switched off the kitchen light. The cabin sank into silence, but the kind that felt safe, not the suffocating silence of the past. I brewed myself a cup of herbal tea, sat by the window, and watched the snow fall, thinking about the years behind me, about my parents, about Tyler, about the old house, about those who once put conditions on my kindness, who turned family into an endless debt. And then I thought of the question, still unanswered. When those who betrayed you return, stripped of power, stripped of pretense, left only with regret, do you forgive, or do you simply hold the distance needed to protect your peace? I don't have a clear answer. All I know is this: I'm here, in winter, in a home that's mine alone. And I am no longer cold. I sat quietly, fingers tracing the rim of a warm ceramic cup, eyes on the window where snow still fell in steady rhythm, like a wordless song. In this little cabin, I've stitched back every torn piece of myself with clarity, with moments of saying enough, and with silences timed just right. But I understand each of us has our own way of facing wounds. Some choose forgiveness to ease the heart, some keep their distance like armor. As for me, I'm still learning to stand between those two lines, between hurt and compassion, between past and present, to find a place where I can breathe without owing anyone. And you? If you were me, would you open the door again? When those who once drained you come back seeking forgiveness, would you reach out or quietly guard the peace you paid so dearly to have? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Perhaps your story could be the light someone else needs while walking through a very long winter. And if these slices of life about family, choices, and resilience resonate with you, hit follow. There are many more stories, raw, intimate, sometimes painful, but always carrying hope, waiting for you to listen.